Hi everyone, great to have all of you here today. My name is Karina Jhangiani. I am an investor at GSV Ventures. We are an early stage seed and Series A focused investment fund in learning and talent technology. So we focus on the pre-K through grade spectrum. It's early childhood, K-12, higher education, and the enterprise. In light of recent events in the world we are living in today, it is so important to address the power of diversity in EdTech investing. At GSV, we have this phrase, talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. And investing in diversity is a moral and civil imperative and will always lead to better results. I am so honored today to be in the midst of four incredible individuals who are backing diverse talent and looking to transform both the founder and funder landscapes. I'll let each of them introduce themselves, but today we have Sandro Olivieri, founder and president of Productive, Isabelle Hau, partner at Imaginable Futures, Shauntel Garvey, general partner at Reach Capital, and Bennin, managing partner at New You Venture Partners. I'd love for each of you quickly to start by just saying a couple words, introducing yourselves and your firm. Sandro, we'll begin with you.
Okay, hi, thank you. Good morning. I'm happy to be here. As Karina mentioned, I run a company called Productive. I think I know most of the people in this community through our work with AT&T on their Aspire EdTech Accelerator, which we've been running for the past 6 years.
Awesome. Andre, do you want to go next? I'm going across my screen.
Sounds good. Andre Bennin, managing partner at New You Venture Partners. Our fund is investing in the intersection of digital learning and the future of work. We've been in business since last year. Prior to New You Venture Partners, I worked at Strata Education Network, where I led strategic investments there. Glad to be with you guys.
Great. Isabelle?
Yeah, hi, thank you, Karina. Thank you for hosting this important conversation. Isabelle Hau, I'm a partner at Imaginable Futures, which is the education venture of the Omidyar Group. At Imaginable Futures, we focus on a two-generation strategy where we invest in the littlest learners and trying to bring an equity lens from the start of life and in adult learners.
Perfect, thank you. And Shauntel?
Hi, Shauntel Garvey. I'm a co-founder and general partner at Reach Capital. We are an early stage investment fund, and we invest in technologies and tools that support educators, learners, and parents all across the education spectrum. So from early childhood up through lifelong learning and workforce development. We're now investing out of our second fund.
Perfect, thank you. So I'd love to open today's conversation with a very open-ended question about just quick reactions and thoughts to what you believe this time will do in terms of accelerating the embrace of diversity in the investing landscape, and any quick predictions you have as to how this time will really change things going forward. Sandra, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. This is all very long-term work. It's work that should not need to be accelerated in this time. We shouldn't have had to wait for massive national events to get us going. I'm glad it's here, but the fruits of today's labor are not going to be felt by founders for another couple of years, and the resulting students that they serve for another, I don't know, 5 to 10. So I'm glad it's happening now. It's about time. We've been waiting a long time for something like this to happen. Not that anything that's happening is necessarily good, but the change it's fomenting, it's definitely a positive steps in the right direction. So it's long-term work. And so as far as predictions, I think we're going to get closer and closer to the equitable outcomes that all students deserve. But it remains to be seen. We have to stay focused, keeping the ship on the right course. And so the work is certainly not over.
Perfect, thank you.
I'll go to, I'm hoping that, I'm cautiously optimistic, right? And hoping that, as Sandra was saying, this is not just a moment in time, but this is definitely a step change in the right direction and work that will continue past this moment. What I'm hopeful for is that, always seeing venture capital in entrepreneurship as engines of wealth creation. And as we think about bringing in more diverse people into this ecosystem, I really believe that this can be a time where we start to really address economic inequities by having more diverse people participate in this venture capital and entrepreneurship ecosystem. So really hoping that this time we look back and say this was a lever to really reduce economic inequalities.
Yeah, I'm also hoping that this goes beyond a group of us that's very impact focused and that have cared about this issue deeply, and really goes into mainstream investing in a bigger way. And I was just relooking at data on mainstream VC and the benefits of investing in diversity, and the data are so compelling. Even if you don't care about impact, if you care solely about financial returns, a VC that invests in an entrepreneur of the same school will generate 11% lower returns in average from an exit. And a VC that invests in someone that has the same ethnicity background that him or her will generate financial returns that are 26% lower. So this, even from a financial perspective, this makes sense. Diversity is a really positive financial outcome. So that's what I'm hoping for in this long game that Sandro and Shauntel are outlining, that it goes beyond the impact group that we are and goes into mainstream.
Yeah, and I agree with all the comments that have been made. My hope is this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of like changing the landscape and the ecosystem in the VC and entrepreneurship world. And now hopefully I can be candid here. And if you look at the ecosystem in EdTech investing, and Shauntel, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but like Shauntel is probably, if not the first GP that's African American in this space, and I think there's an opportunity to really change the landscape, and the way that you do that is keeping the topic at the forefront of our mind and making sure that we're actually moving the needle instead of making this just a discussion like we always do. All right, there's a lack of diversity in the space, and there's no follow-up item, no follow-up action items, and that's unfortunate. So how do you keep keep the discussion going at the forefront of our mind and make sure that we're moving the needle on it? I think that's the real question here.
No, definitely. And in terms of like wanting to move the needle and make sure that this isn't just reduced to a moment, but rather has long-term impact and change, we have to start with the internal first. And we have to look at our own investment teams. And Shauntel, you kind of address this and see how we are diversifying the people that we give a seat at the table. Shauntel, can you maybe kick us off and talk about, and I'd love to hear from all of you, like what specific initiatives can VC funds take to make sure they're diversifying their own teams internally?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of different strands here. So first, yes, I think it is important to obviously have a diverse team. Obviously, you want to have different perspectives coming to the table. It definitely improves your investment decisions, having all those different perspectives around the table, as well as allows you to tap into different networks. So I think, thinking about, how do we tap into entrepreneurs of different backgrounds or more Black and brown founders? Well, you start with having team members who have those networks. So I think that's number one. One of the things that we've been really thinking about, and I've been thinking about, is I think it really starts early. So I always tell people this, but I did not know what a VC was until I became one. So, just even early exposure to this industry is so critical, because this is an industry that, one, there's no typical path. Two, there's an apprenticeship model, so it takes years to just kind of shadow and be around other VCs. And three, you have to have the networks to really get in and kind of be in the right place at the right time. So we've been really thinking about even our internship programs, and even we're starting really early. So this year we had high school interns, and just exposing them to what this work looks like, how do you get into this field? And then even with your internship programs, thinking about recruiting from diverse programs. So this year we partnered with an organization called the Black Venture Capital Consortium. And what they do is they recruit students from HBCUs who want to go into venture paths, and they place them into venture funds. So that's just one example, but I do think as you think about your team, really starting early and who you're bringing on in terms of your internship programs.
Thanks. At time, and I agree with Shauntel. At time, it's incumbent upon us in terms of like the leadership of the VC fund to really like make a difference here, and it depends on our mindset, right? So for us and new venture partners, we have leeway to really go out and build a team now. So the first hire that I wanted to make was to bring on a female partner, and the female partner might be Black. You never know. But at the same time, like my first hire in the fund was a gentleman by the name of Joe Camacho. His family immigrated from Mexico, and he's had experience in investment banking. So for me, like it was like kind of a no-brainer. Given his background, very similar to my own background as an immigrant as well, to bring him on board. And then in terms of like even at the junior team, like below Joel, like you need to diversify that as well. Like having a diverse team that really helps influence the investment that you make. Like if your team is not diverse, you're not going to be thinking about investing in a diverse like entrepreneur pool. Given the makeup of our team right now, like we're looking at like our sourcing not only involves like funds that are or entrepreneurs that are mission aligned, but also entrepreneurs that are diverse. And that's more of my priority, and it's more of a like I think it's extremely important for me to lead that effort in terms of sourcing and finding these founders that are diverse. The other piece that I think is also important in terms of like diversifying team, like the organization, and we'll probably get to that as probably a question, but like the organization that are backing you, like the LPs, like need to have they need to have diversity as part of their mission. They need to be focused and serious about it as well. And for us as fund managers, like if we hear coming from the LPs from their in terms of their priorities, if they're focused on like, hey, like you need to invest in diverse founders, like that's something that we'll pay attention to. But for us and new venture partners, it's already top of mind. So
maybe two things on diversity of team that were helpful for us. One is having headhunters that are also diverse and think about diversity. So we partnered with very successfully with Management Leadership of Tomorrow, which has an arm focused on headhunting, who was very, very helpful. And then two is also thinking about their diversity in a multi-pronged approach and valuing different types of experiences. So not only race, ethnicity, or gender, or demographic, but also the experience, and valuing different types of experiences, and bringing some cooperating experience in education has been terrific in some of my colleagues that we have hired.
Oh, that's fantastic. And one other thing that I've been thinking about, Isabelle, actually you mentioned these stats earlier. There's something to say about diversifying your own teams, but there's also something to say investing is a very personal initiative, right? And we tend to sometimes relate more to people that look like us and come from similar backgrounds. So how can we address unconscious bias in the investment process, even beyond diversifying our teams and making sure that we're giving everyone a fair shot at that pitch, and not just, bias towards people that look and feel like us?
Yeah, I was reviewing recently as part of a prize that were called the Rise Prize that we were running, a number of applications, and I had to remind myself of that because I could literally perceive who was a white woman, which application had been written by white women, and as it turned out, I had a preference for those, I really had to remind myself of unconscious biases, which I think exist everywhere. We all have them. So it's repeat training, it's repeat really thinking, trying to reset when you think about a new opportunity and examine the biases along the way at every step. We are also now thinking about having more determined targets. So to help both on pipeline and portfolio construction. So just maybe the next step in our journey.
Yeah, I'll just echo that, because I think, part of it is being intentional. And so, I've written about this. I think, having a diverse team is step one. But then step two is really being explicit and calling out potential unconscious or conscious bias and building that into actually your investment process. And the thing with venture capital, a lot of the investment decisions are instinctual. They're based on pattern recognition. Especially as you're doing early stage, you're making judgments about teams. And so what we've started doing is just really calling out when we're making an assessment or when we're making a judgment, and just really calling out that bias really specifically. So I'll give an example. So for teams, we really look for people who we call are scrappy and are risk-taking, right? And that may look very different in different people depending on what backgrounds they're coming from. And so risk-taking, even though we value that, we have to make sure that we're not having a certain bias on what risk-taking actually looks like, given a certain founder's background. So that's just one example, just really calling it out and saying, hey, are we looking at this differently because of either pattern recognition or entrepreneurs that we typically see, again, and just being very explicit.
I would just add that I feel like the previous question and this one are very related. Unconscious bias is unconscious. It's really hard to just rid yourself of it entirely. And so having a diverse team looking at investments and being explicit and intentional about calling things out and sort of testing the boundaries of what your bias is really the best way to go. So as long as you're approaching things with a diverse team and you have all as many sort of points of view represented in your investment committee as possible, you're doing some work towards getting rid of that unconscious bias.
Definitely. And, one other issue that I'd love to address is a lot of people have said it could be a pipeline problem. And we know that that's not the case. There's amazing entrepreneurs out there. So how can we make sure that we are tapping into the right networks and taking the right measures so we can actually successfully encounter these amazing entrepreneurs with diverse backgrounds and not reduce it to a pipeline problem?
Yeah, if I could start there, because I think I'm earlier than most on the panel. It is a pipeline problem and it isn't. It's not that the entrepreneurs aren't there. It's just that literally the infrastructure that gets them from the early idea stages to the next stages, to the next stage, to where they might get invested in by New You or Reach or Imaginable Futures is severely fragmented. There's huge gaps. People are falling out constantly. The signals that investors depend upon to find deal flow are have a lot of bias in them, reflect the non-diversity of a lot of investors. And so you're right, it is not a pipeline problem because there are incredible diverse entrepreneurs out there, in particular in EdTech. But the actual infrastructure is to get them to the next stage, right? The folks that, the investors that are not attending a panel like this, that's what's broken and needs fixing.
Gray, do you have any thoughts on this as well?
I think, Sandra is right. For us as investors, it's important for us to plug into. It's kind of a network effect, and it's also a matter of us really being plugged into the networks that with diverse entrepreneurs. Making sure that you're part of different accelerators that are focused on diverse founder. Like the work that Aaron Walker is doing is fantastic, and the entrepreneurs that are within his cohorts are all diverse, and And for if you're looking for diverse founders, like this, here's a pool of potential a pipeline of diverse founders you can tap into. Still, like you have to run them through your investment process and make sure that their thesis align, make sure that from a financial perspective or returns perspective, like they match up with what you're trying to accomplish. But at the same time, like getting them plugged into your pipeline is extremely important. I think the other piece that needs to be said here is, and it's been mentioned earlier, like how intentional you are into finding these diverse founders. And we're again, like, we're not on the second fund. This is our first fund. Like we're in the process of making. We'll have 5 portfolio companies by the end of this week. I'll say about 3 out of 4 of our, I say 4 out of 5 of our portfolio companies are led by diverse founders. And I think, like, I'm not saying that it is like because of like I went out and sourced these companies, but at the same time, between Joel and I, like we have an eye toward finding these diverse founders, and it's important. It's important to us to invest in these founders. Mentorship, I think, is also important. Like going as early as what Shauntel was saying. Like if you're mentoring some of these entrepreneurs and making sure that they're getting access to the right network, I think this industry like is very network based. And again, like going back to what Shauntel said earlier. Sorry, you're hearing my baby in the background. My apologies. It's very. It's very network based and it's hard to access the industry. So to the extent that you can extend a hand to these entrepreneurs, and even if you're not going to invest in their companies, and making sure you're getting them plugged into with the right investors that are thesis aligned, I think is something that we should all do as investors in the space if we're trying to move the needle around this topic.
Definitely. And one thing that I'd like to touch on, and Sandro, I'd love for you to start with this because I'm a huge fan of how AT&T Accelerator has handled this situation is, we talk about the pipeline issue, but there's also the issue that some investment programs deliberately or I guess unconsciously don't cater to everyone, right? And so how can you make sure you're designing investment programs to be more friendly to all types of founders? And I know AT&T Accelerator has very specific initiatives around this. So would love for you to kind of detail, and then would love to hear from our other panelists as well.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So if you take, accelerator programs back to their origins, the early ones like YC and 500 Startups and all those guys, there were accelerator programs that defined, we're going to take a cohort, it's going to be time bound, we're going to do some mentorship, some investment, we're going to do this for this much time, and we're going to churn through them. And that is a feature set of these accelerator programs that is designed to create a maximum chance of return on investment. And so when you design an accelerator program that's looking for impact, like we did for AT&T, it turns out that a lot of those features just don't really apply or are counterproductive to what you're trying to do. So by making our program run for 6 months, we've been virtual since day one because EdTech entrepreneurs who are often starting companies based on lived experience and education are literally everywhere and are extremely diverse. If you make it 6 months, make it virtual, and make it 100% customized, meaning we don't do any curriculum for our entrepreneurs, essentially because some of them may come from a SaaS company and get into EdTech. They know everything about lean startup. They know everything about design thinking. They might already know about the sales process. You're wasting somebody's time if you do curriculum. So we are 100% customized to each of the companies in our cohort. And a lot of benefits arise when you sort of lean into what your entrepreneurs need. For example, it turns out we are probably the best accelerator in EdTech for moms. We've had about 8 or 9 babies be born during our sessions. And it makes a ton of sense, right? The flexibility afforded by it, the virtual nature of it, all of that. We have 2 pregnant founders in this cohort right now. It's been a fantastic sort of outcome of just leaning into what your founders need and making it as accessible as possible for as many entrepreneurs as possible. And it's just created seats at the table for folks that were traditionally either locked out of investment or had difficulty accessing it.
That's pretty incredible. You don't hear of many accelerators that have women going through their pregnancy through the program. And I think that just speaks to how inclusive and how deliberate you've been about making sure you're catering to all different types of founders, which is fantastic to see.
And I would love to mention, because the one thing I'm proudest of with this program is that across our portfolio of 45 companies, 70% are founded by women. We have just at 51% founders of color, and 30% of which of the 30% total are Black founders specifically, which I think is extremely important in this time.
Oh, that's fantastic. And Shauntel, I'd love to ask you, I know Reach is as deliberate in its focus on diversity. Can you maybe talk a little bit about the initiatives that you have internally to make sure it's not just about backing diverse talent, but supporting that talent throughout their company building journeys?
Yeah, and also just start too with kind of the previous question in terms of how do we make this more friendly, because it's all kind of tied, right? So think about starting with having a diverse team. That just already makes it a much more comfortable experience for entrepreneurs to come and pitch to us. You know, the number of times I've heard entrepreneurs say, "Hey, this is the first time I've actually been in a, with our team, for example, we have 4 women general partners." And it's like, "Wow, this is the first time I'm pitching to women GPs," or "Wow, this is the first time I'm pitching to such a diverse team." So that already makes it a more friendly environment. And then, as you were talking about just the accessibility and diversifying our networks, one of the things that we do, for example, is have an open call on our website. So, a lot of VCs will say you can only get to us if you have a warm introduction. And we just really feel like not everyone's going to be connected. And so just having on our website a place where anyone can apply, and we actually do look at all those different applications, has really been able to kind of diversify also our pipeline too. And then on the team building, I think it's going to also working with entrepreneurs who also want to build diverse teams, right? And so how can we help them do that? So we've done a lot of partnerships where we're helping to source talent for our companies, which is always super high leverage in helping them kind of source diverse talent for them. But again, I think goes back from helping them being supported all the way through the investment stage, and then helping them kind of feel comfortable in this ecosystem.
Definitely. Isabelle, do you have anything to add to the initiatives in terms of what you're doing at Imaginable Futures?
Yeah, I would say we think about it in both internally and externally for our portfolio a little bit the same way. We have, there is diversity and then there is inclusion. And so diversity is more about the stats of, having, diverse team or diverse portfolio. Inclusion is a journey. And it's much more complicated. And in that journey, one theme that Dre raised around mentorship has come up many, many times in our more diverse founder set, where they often are the only unicorn out there in their own, particular category. And here I'm thinking particularly if you combine the double whammy of gender and ethnicity. So if you are a Black woman or a Latinx woman founder, which there are very, very few, I think it's 0.3% of all venture capital that went to women Latinx founders, and 0.0000 something that went to Black women founders. So virtually there are almost nobody around them to look for peer-to-peer interactions, mentorship. So this feeling of isolation and the need for support is definitely there. So it has come up many times. And this is an area where I think there is maybe an opportunity among us to do even more.
Definitely. And, just kind of piggybacking off of that, Dre, I know you mentioned this in your opener, but would love for all of you to kind of elaborate further. Like, what is the role of mentorship from GPs? What have you seen at your individual funds in terms of how GPs are supporting, even beyond just the firm-wide initiatives? And I know, Dre, you mentioned this in your opener, so I'd love for you to elaborate to begin.
Oh, I'm on mute. Make sure you guys don't hear my son in the background. So in terms of mentorship, I feel like it's incumbent upon GPs to really roll up their sleeves with their portfolio companies. So you're not just a passive investor, but it's your goal to participate alongside them, help them scale, but also if your mission or your thinking is, hey, let's help diversify your team, just like Shauntel said, roll up your sleeve and help them source talent that's diverse. And again, in terms of specifically speaking to mentorship, as you're investing in these companies, some of these founders are bootstrapped. So this is their first time taking on institutional capital. So it's incumbent upon you to really help them navigate not only the funding space, help them navigate in terms of help them navigate the ecosystem in terms of plugging them into resources or clients or whatever that will help them scale. And to be honest, a lot of founders that are diverse don't have the network to be able to do that. So as a GP with an extensive network, it's incumbent upon you to really open up your network for your portfolio company. I think it's a win-win for not only the GP, but also the portfolio company if you're helping them tap into resources that they wouldn't otherwise have the ability to tap into.
Definitely. And I don't think we can talk about the founder and funder landscapes and trying to diversify that without talking about the role LPs have in this. And within EdTech specifically, what impact could it have if funds have LPs whose mission is educating diverse students? And what are some other impact metrics that LPs can require going forward? Shauntel, I'd love to start off with you if you have any thoughts on this question.
Yeah, I think the good news is we're starting to see commitment from the LP community on this front. And so starting to actually see LPs ask the questions. And so that starts with LPs saying, what does your team look like? Holding venture funds accountable for the diversity of their team. So I think that's starting point one. And then also even asking at the portfolio level, right? And saying, from the portfolio level perspective, how have you been intentional about the diversity of the founders that you're backing? And it's one thing to have kind of metrics and check the box, but I think what's really going to make a difference is when they really tie funding to that, right? And so making sure that the venture funds that are intentional do build this into their work are the ones that are getting funding, because that's when money talks. So when capital is then tied to these outcomes, I think that's when we're really going to move the needle.
So
definitely,
maybe I'll make a comment. Haven't come from the LP world as well. A lot of LPs, and I'm not going to speak specifically to my time at Strata, but as Strata, we invested in a lot of LPs, and for some of our LPs, because we're so impact driven, we had side letters with some of the GPs that we invested in. So as an LP, you have capital that you can deploy into these funds, and you can enter into side letters with your GPs. If you're really focused on these issues, put them in the side letter and hold your GP accountable on these issues. It's not the GP will be accommodating to the side letter and do their best to hold up their end of the bargain. But at the same time, they succumb upon the LP to really draft these metrics that they're focused on and care about into these side letters as they're executing these legal docs with the GPs.
That makes total sense. And I could continuously ask questions, but I know for the sake of time, I want to also look at the Q&A real quickly from our audience. And some of these questions are asking for more elaborations on what's already addressed. So the first question, Sandro, I'd love for you to maybe kick us off here, given that you're at the earliest stage, you're in the accelerator stage. Can you talk a little more specifically about how you've built the diverse pipeline? So you've talked about how you've shaped the program to make sure it's inclusive, but what are you doing? What networks are you tapping into at the early stage?
Yeah, a lot of the work, we like to call it's hand-to-hand combat, right? You have to get in there. You got to talk to as many founders as possible. You got to find the ones that really speak to you or speak to the problems that need addressing in education. And you just need to be as open as possible. I reserve, gosh, depending on the week, it must be at least 10 hours a week just to talk to founders, just constantly talking to founders, getting referrals, talking. Even if I never work with them again, I open up my own networks. I provide advice and guidance. Amanda Dormeral, who's in our cohort this session, I think I was talking to her for probably a year before I got to work with her directly through this program. And so it's just all of that, right? Because the truth of the matter is, yeah, we need to be able to depend on folks like Dre mentioned, Aaron Walker at Camelback, Transparent Collective, like everybody out there that's sort of specifically targeting founders of color and Black entrepreneurs in particular. We love all the work that they're doing, but it's not enough, right? The pipeline needs to, it's kind of a funnel. Like there's always going to be less folks at the growth stage, and there need to be more at the bottom stages, right? We love 4.0 schools, what they're doing. We love what all of these early stage folks that are giving everybody an opportunity to try entrepreneurship and education. We love all those folks, but it's really about just opening up your network. It's hand-to-hand combat, getting out there right now, because there's not enough structure to signal what the top diverse entrepreneurs are. So you really have to, right now, it's really hand-to-hand combat. And I will say just one final point on that is that mentorship is great. And it can be super transformative, but the problem has always been, and I think it's a bigger problem in the early stages and later, is that we are locking entrepreneurs of color out of capital. Like the capital is so necessary. I don't think we can begin to solve any of these problems without putting the money in the hands of Black entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of color in general. So I wanted to make that point.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And as a quick follow-up to that, Isabelle, I know you and I have talked about how it's not only important to support entrepreneurs in the early stage, but make sure that they go on to raise the Series A, B, C, D rounds to ultimately get to that mature company status and execute on their dreams. Can you talk a little bit, Isabelle, about like, what are the near-term goals at Imaginable Futures in ensuring that it doesn't stop just there and that your entrepreneurs go on to raise subsequent rounds of capital and are supported throughout the journeys?
Yeah, it's because I think the issues that Sandro was mentioning are exacerbated actually, and it's along the capital spectrum in later stage across gender, and it's true for both gender and race and ethnicity, unfortunately, which means that not only there are not enough founders at the at the bottom at the early stage. There are even lesser of those in later rounds. And so I think for us as investors, once we have invested in those organizations, is continuing supporting them, making sure that they are well funded. Sandro, thank you for your point. We actually just looked at this across our portfolio, just making sure there is not a gap between, because there is, just generally speaking, I think it's about 25% gap between the amount of funding that goes into a person of color and a white entrepreneur. So ensuring that we are also at Imaginable Future doing our share and maybe doing even more there, because if the entrepreneur needs additional supports and all those things cost money in an organization, so shouldn't there be a gap in the other way?
Definitely. And going back to Q&A, I see Amanda asked a question on how do you advise talent leaders to encourage hiring managers and exec teams to showcase just how important it is to hire diverse talent? Shauntel, do you maybe want to kick us off there and tell us maybe in your experiences working with companies, how you're advising them to hire the right diverse talent?
Yeah, and I think, one of the important things to call out here is just the fact that we are EdTech investors, right? And thinking about what is the mission of the company and who are the students that that company is serving. And obviously they're definitely come from diverse backgrounds. And so you can easily make a business case and an impact case that by bringing in diverse talent into the team, they will be better able to execute on the mission of that company. So we always have that conversation. For example, we have a company that's really focused on equity within education. And so when we did the search, we actually built that into the search criteria around someone who really understands equity and has a lived experience. And we did end up hiring a Black CEO and for that company. And I think really, again, tying the business case to why having a diverse leader was so important, was critical in having those conversations with the search firm.
Dre, do you have anything to add to this as you work with companies and making sure that they hire the right diverse talent?
So for every investment that we make at NUVP, that we enter into a side letter with these companies, these portfolio companies, and in terms of the metrics that we're tracking, like we have some that are enumerated within the side letter, but also we work in good faith with the founders to identify impact metrics that will be mutually beneficial to NUVP, but also to their companies. And to the extent that we're investing in founders that are serving a diverse population, I think in terms of the impact metrics that we would discuss with the founders, like pursuing or per the side letter that we enter into with them, will be, hey, like how do we get more diverse talent into your leadership team, into your executive team, and ultimately into your team in general. And I think there's a power in side letters. And again, like as investors, like I'm not trying to be a doomsday person here, but like if you're investing in the company and you're serious about a specific topic and you put in the side letter and your founders are not executing on that, then hey, you're going to raise multiple rounds, and when you come up for the second round, like we're going to have that discussion and see how well you meet those metrics, and that's one thing that you can be. Again, it goes back to the comments that were made earlier. How intentional are you when it comes to these issues? And if you're intentional, then you want to hold your founders' feet to the fire and enter to a side letter with them and make sure that you're highlighting those impact metrics that are important to you and your fund. So.
I love the concept of intentionality. And one question that popped up thanks to the amazing Q&A that I completely didn't address yet is, we're in education. So many of the world's problems can be solved with education, and we're so mission oriented. Apart from backing diverse talent, apart from diversifying our own teams, how do you kind of think about the criteria of access, inclusion, making sure the solution that you're backing caters to diverse learners? Like when you're examining that company to support Sandro and the accelerator, or Isabelle, Dre, and Shauntel to support in your funding, do you ask the entrepreneurs like what solutions what is their target audience? Is that solution actually going to widen access to high quality education? I'd love for all of you to talk about that, because EdTech has the power to change a lot of the issues we're seeing.
Yes, so maybe I'll jump in here. So at New Venture Partner, we have 5 investment themes. The first one is access and affordability. So within access and affordability, you have like alternative financing mechanism. You have ways that you're helping learners get access to post-secondary work, et cetera. And like when it comes to access and affordability, again, like how intentional are you? For us, it's one of our investment themes, and we want to make sure that we're funding companies or potential portfolio companies that fit within that investment theme. I think for most of us, like as we see the ecosystem develop, and in terms of access and affordability, like again, going back to what I mentioned in terms of like the side letters, like the student population is important, right? So if you're investing in company X, you know that they're serving like communities that are like low income population, they're serving adult learners, they're serving like first gen, et cetera, then it's important for you to make sure that they're really doing a good job at serving these population in general.
I would take it back to also just the importance, it keeps coming up, right? The importance of diversity in our own teams as we're doing this. I feel like it's I mean, I'm a child of refugees. I grew up in a low-income household. You know, I can sniff it out. I'm reading applications. I can sniff it out. Is this going to work for me when I was a kid, an ELL student, low income, you know, all of these things? Is this going to work for me, or is this for, you know, the folks on the other side of the tracks, right? And so it's easier for somebody who's had that lived experience in the public education system, coming from a low income household, to see that stuff. And honestly, it's hard to vocalize because it's kind of in my bones, right? Like, it's what I lived, it's my life. So, you know, there's two messages here that we can drive home, or at least I would love to drive home. It's give diverse founders money, and to diversify your teams to do so. Those are the two sort of things that have been top of mind for me in this moment of crisis at the intersection of education and racial justice.
I would say, you know, as we're evaluating both companies and teams, you know, obviously we want to make sure that we look at the populations that they're serving. So we actually do work with our founders to measure that. And so we'll measure the ethnic, breakdown, socioeconomic breakdown of the constituents and students that they're serving. So I think that's one way to look at it. But then it's also asking questions about the product. So we've had companies who, for example, decided to do a mobile first product because they were targeting parents who mobile was their main communication to get online, right? And so things that you're doing, even intentionally within your product, to make sure that it's accessible to certain populations is also important. So asking those questions early on, even in the product development stage.
Yeah, most of our investments are under that criteria of gap lessening, or gap, just trying to reduce a gap. We make a few exceptions here and there when we see the potential for a sector level change through a solution that can impact a broader population from the start with a particular thesis. And I could give examples if that's helpful, but that's an exception for us. So a majority is gap lessening, but we have a few investments that could be considered as gap widening from the beginning, but they were done under a sector level impact thesis that we have at Imaginable Futures, especially in early childhood.
Fantastic. And I know we have 3 minutes left, and so would love for any final thoughts. And I'll quickly go. It's been incredible to hear all the efforts that the four of you are putting into changing this, and that's what honestly gives me hope in this time, is that hopefully there will come a day. And going back to what I said at GSV, what we believe, which is that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. Hopefully there will be a day that I don't have to say that anymore, and that will be thanks to the efforts of the four of you and many others. And so would love any final parting thoughts, and thank you in advance for just joining us today and sharing the efforts that you guys are putting into changing this ecosystem.
I think I've shared my two main points, but I will say that, we diversify your teams, give entrepreneurs of color more money. Like, that is going to go a long way towards solving a lot of the problems that we're facing, not just for those founders, but for the students they serve down the line. We are going to we're going to increase equitable, or get more equitable outcomes in education if we do those two things. But the final thing I will say, because I'm on the early stage, we really got to see this as a pipeline. We got to see it as a pipeline, and we got to work to patch the holes that exist along it. No matter where you are on the pipeline, we have to be able to work to fill in, the holes that occur earlier in the pipeline, or make sure that there's no holes later on in the pipeline, so that folks you're investing in early have a place to go, or, folks that are earlier than where you are at actually get the opportunity to get to you. We have to do that work. We have to be intentional. We have to work together, no matter where we are on the pipeline, to make sure that the pipeline is intact, because right now it's pretty leaky. And so I think there's some work to be done there, and I'm happy to talk to anybody about figuring out how to solve that problem.
I'll go. I think we've hit on the fact to be intentional. So this work takes intentionality, especially if we want it to persist beyond this moment. My other point is go beyond traditional mentorship and really leverage your social capital, your networks, and your resources to support these founders. And also, this starts early, right? And so, as we're all in the world of education, how do we even prepare students to go into the field of entrepreneurship, to go into the field of venture capital? That starts early with exposure to these different ecosystems.
I'll go next. So, adding to comments that have been said, I think, like for me personally, like if you're an entrepreneur of color and I don't know about you, like that's my bad. But at the same time, if you're an entrepreneur of color and you know about new venture partners and you fit within our investment thesis, reach out. That's like my biggest thing. And I'm saying all. Like I'm saying it to like Shauntel, to Isabelle, to Sandro. If you know them and you see them fit within our thesis, send them our way. We'd love to take a look at them. And the other piece is it's not enough to just like invest in these companies and just like sit back passively and let your money grow. Like one of my favorite investors in the space is our good friend DQ, Deborah Quazzo, and Deborah, you can speak to any entrepreneur that she's backed. When she invests in you, she rolls up her sleeves and she goes to work with alongside you. And I think it's important for any investor to do that, especially for founders of color. If you're investing in them, it's going to take some hand holding, and you need to be there every step of the way, whether it be plugging them in with different investors that will come in on in their subsequent round, or just like help them scale and be a kitchen cabinet for them, like a resource for them to help them scale. So.
Yes, I could not agree more on the Deborah point, especially. And Isabelle, final thoughts.
Yeah, I think intentionality along, every step of the way was already well covered. The other one that we think a lot about and is, in the equity, we call it JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And this notion of justice, I think, is critical as we move forward. I think it might be more than equity. It's really thinking about what are the needs of entrepreneur in a really just way.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Sandro, Dre, Isabelle, and Shauntel for joining us this morning. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. I remain hopeful for the future. Thanks to all of you. And look forward to staying in touch. Thank you for joining the session.